Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be here, to have the opportunity today to talk to you about a subject that's really close to my heart, that of what really makes a quality experience for healthcare professionals in the ever-changing world with the ever-changing needs of today. Before I begin by taking you on this journey, let me briefly introduce you to myself. For those of you who don't know me, and I do see a number of familiar names actually, my name is Laura Dix, and I am a managing director within Accenture's life sciences practice, based out of a rather sunny London today, here in the UK. And over the last 10 years or more, I've been almost uniquely focused on the mission to help improve, enhance, differentiate HCP experiences, largely through field force transformation. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to share my screen, hopefully this will work, and I'm going to begin taking you through a point of view that you are the first, almost the first people to see, just regarding, hopefully my screen will now be fully showing, but please jump in if it isn't, regarding what we feel really defines the quality HCP experiences that we believe physicians and other healthcare professionals today expect. So it might be worth me beginning by talking a little about some of our recent research that we conducted within Accenture back in the summer. And that research gave us some compelling insights into the role that the COVID-19 pandemic has played in driving lasting change to what we believe healthcare professionals need and value. Compellingly, we noted that many had felt to a degree overwhelmed by the amount of content that they were receiving. Almost 6 in 10 believed that they'd felt to a degree spammed by at least one pharmaceutical company during the height of the pandemic. However, on the other side of the coin, there was some encouragement, some acknowledgement that Pharma was changing the sorts of support services offered beyond the traditional product detail, beyond what was normally communicated about, providing new types of support services and information that met their most pressing needs. And it's very interesting to see and to hear a lot of the industry commentary out there about the consequences of this change, this acceleration the pandemic has brought to new ways of engaging. If I was to give my honest opinion, I'd say that perhaps there's been some over-indexing on the focus on reach. I wouldn't quite call it the omnichannel obsession, but there's a lot of focus on channels, which of course is really, really important. But perhaps that's done so to the expense a little of the what. What does a great experience look like? Once you've reached me by whichever channel I prefer, how can you bring the most value in the precious time that I as a healthcare provider have given to you? So what we're going to do as we move forward in this brief presentation is give you a flavour of what I and what we believe are some of the key dimensions, the key components that define a quality HCP experience in practice. It's worth saying that never has the opportunity to be differentiated, to be distinctive, been so great. It's my belief that COVID-19 has created a really new, a wide open experience playing field, and there's no going back to the new one. And it remains my belief, and I think the belief of my colleagues, that the role of the pharmaceutical rep remains key. We might even call them the captain of that playing field. And actually, we've seen even before the pandemic, forward-thinking companies really elevate the autonomy, the authority that they give their reps as orchestrators of the experience. And I think that's going to evolve even further. So what do we define as a great experience? What, as we say here, are the facets of quality that make for a really valuable encounter with pharma that HCPs will appreciate, sincerely engage with, and want more of in the future? They will actively want to dedicate their time to having more of this experience. We believe that one dimension is to be relevant. I feel that this is a really helpful and interesting use of my time. I'm glad that I dedicated this time in my incredibly busy and stressful day to having this interaction with you because I feel it has uniquely served my needs. To be consumable, I can digest this information in a way that feels really convenient to me. It's easily curated to my needs and those of my patients. I can consume it at the point of need, and I can further cascade it or utilize it as I wish. To be accessible, I don't have to wait for a rep to come to me. I can proactively go and find the support that I need on my own terms. And that gives me a great experience that I actively want to re-engage with in the future. To be connective, I know that I'm intrinsically driven to connect with and network with my colleagues. And wouldn't it be great, Pharma, if you could help broker some of those connections? Of course, within the boundaries of what's compliant, but I'd really benefit from learning with like-minded peers. To be purposeful, and I think this is a really interesting one, I feel like your connection with me is authentically patient-centric. I feel that candor. I feel that emotional, empathetic connection and your dedication, your heightened, elevated sense of purpose, ever more important after COVID, in your interaction with me. So what we'll now do, and I appreciate these won't be exhaustive, there will be other definitions, and of course no one person is the same, but what we'll do is we're going to dive briefly into each of these 5 dimensions, each of these 5 ingredients, and we're going to reflect a little further on what some of our recent insights and data tell us from some of our research. We'll look at opportunities to be able to take a step up that this presents for pharma, and we'll also start to think about some of the possibilities for making these dimensions of experience even more compelling than they are today through very tangible and practical steps. So we're going to begin by diving into relevance. I feel like this is a truly helpful and interesting use of my time. For me, one of the most compelling insights from our Reinventing Relevance HCP survey last year, where we surveyed just over 700 healthcare professionals, was that almost 6 in 10 of them felt like pharmaceutical companies didn't really understand the impacts of COVID-19 on them. And almost half believed the same for pharma's understanding of impacts on their patients. Simultaneously, we noted that preferences for the mode of engagement and the support services offered were quite different, perhaps, to what we traditionally would have anticipated the interaction to be. A really good number felt that digital patient education, information on how to treat patients more remotely, were of particular interest. And there are 2 interesting dimensions I'd like to touch on today to the opportunity to bring more relevance. The first dimension is how to achieve that truly unique personalization to individuals and bring their unique understanding of their customer to create an experience more individualized to what those customers as unique human beings want and need. And even before the COVID pandemic began, I noted that there were some organizations that were very proactive about rethinking, reimagining the role of their reps and the autonomy that those reps could have, the accountability, the trust if you put in them that could result in even more targeted, personalized experiences. What if, for example, reps had the autonomy to handpick and enroll physicians in targeted digital campaigns? What if, as we've seen in at least one example, reps could use publicly available outcomes data to drive more differentiating, more value-focused conversations? We actually saw a diabetes company change the nature of their dialogue in a recent scenario by creating a digital capability to integrate health scores with the field, empower their reps with new insights to the health outcomes of the prescriber's patient base. And this enabled questions to be a lot more targeted and pertinent to that audience of customers. Now, of course, we know that there will always be a focus on branded promotional content. But the focus on product detailing in all of its dimensions can perhaps also underplay the not insignificant role that non-promotional experiences can play, cultivating loyalty and advocacy in the longer term. Now, because they don't present immediate returns in terms of sales uplift, they can be easy to overlook. But we think it's important for pharma to think beyond the lens of the near term and think more about the possibilities that creating great educational content, which has always been noted as quite a gap for HCPs, could bring. And actually, as a result, thinking about how you broaden the conversation from a sales play about the product alone to more of a learning experience experience about the product's role in the care pathway, COVID-19's impact on the care pathway, as a driver of value and longer-term return on investment. So relevance always remains front and center. And I think to conclude on this one, really considering how do you elevate the rep? How do you maybe explore other engagement opportunities that bring relevance truly tailored to what we know HCPs want and value, offers a really interesting space to differentiate. Moving on now to our second dimension, being consumable in practice. I can digest information in a way that's convenient for me and for my patients. Now, we know that finding the right information to share with patients can be a time-consuming exercise for healthcare providers, and it's often not as straightforward as they'd like. We find that patient-friendly content can be difficult to access. It can be perhaps too generic. There's a lot of evidence out there to suggest it can be too peppered with indecipherable medical jargon, and that actually, patients in particular want something more digestible, understandable, actually to be truly helpful. And pharma-generated materials can often be difficult to adapt to serve this need quickly and efficiently and clearly. Now, we've seen some companies respond very quickly to the need to create and provide intelligible patient information distilled in a really easy to consume format during the height of the COVID pandemic. For one rare disease client, for example, who had a product serving a largely immunocompromised juvenile population, they were very quick to create a resource that was easy for patients to understand the local care and testing facilities available to them at a time when restrictions on travel were in place. But it's worth noting as well that the value of curation of content doesn't just serve the patient experience. And actually, for healthcare professionals themselves, the opportunity to access fresh, tailored content paired with their personal, their professional interests can be particularly helpful and particularly valuable. And I think doing this really effectively requires a couple of dimensions of understanding. Firstly, knowing the unique preferences, passions of each individual HCP, their affiliations, publications they've contributed to, conferences they've attended. There's a whole wealth of ways of accessing novel data, right down to the social media that they've liked, that really give you a sense of that human need, back to the relevance point, and that very unique value that you can bring them. And then secondly, and I think increasingly we're seeing this, establishing how micro moments communicating distilled information could blend conveniently into the rhythms of a healthcare professional's day, be it a podcast on the way to work, for example. So there are a few what ifs here if we think about how this all might be applied to real life. What if HCPs could access a platform with curated, with trustworthy information, where they could assemble modular content relevant to each patient case or scenario, tailored by factors like literacy, age, emotional preference, and extractable in a format that was tailored to a particular preference as well? What if, serving the HCP themselves, they had more opportunities to receive bite-sized consumable digests of things like congresses, customized to their own interests, offering summaries on the product or the latest advancements in clinical care applicable to their area of practice? There are many opportunities here to be bite-sized and consumable to serve the need of patients and of healthcare providers, and enabling one to serve the other. If we move to number 3 of 5, our next dimension we'll quickly dive into, being accessible in practice. What does that really mean? I can find the support that I need on my own terms. We know, and we've known even before the pandemic, that time constraints of healthcare professionals are more intense and pronounced than ever. Even back in 2017, we did a review of oncologists in the UK and non-small cell lung cancer, and one of the primary feedback points we got was just a clear issue around capacity. And of course, it's only become worse for many specialist areas as well. And equally, challenges accessing HCPs, I'm sure this will be a common theme through this summit, are also more pronounced than ever before. I think another one of the most memorable data points of our HCP survey back in the summer was the fact that of those healthcare professionals whose practices were implementing restrictions to reps coming in, almost 3 in 10, 28% believed that this was something that could be implemented permanently. Now, of course, we're seeing more recent insights that might suggest some are more willing to get back to face, actually, but we know it's going to continue to amplify the challenge. But conversely to that, we also note that an increasing number and demographic of HCPs are becoming more and more digitally fluent. They have expectations around their engagements with digital to access content at the point of need when they want to. So perhaps it's therefore fair to say that even when compellingly executed, HCP experiences that are solely reactive to digital or rep-initiated outreach could well be missing a trick. We know that many on-demand solutions actually are now starting to appear in the market. Platforms that enable HCPs to proactively connect with reps, rapidly source answers to their questions, access resources at the point of need, offering perhaps a more frictionless, a more convenient mode of engagement, fundamentally on the HCP's own terms. And if that engagement on their own terms is effective, of course, it opens up a bunch of possibilities that perhaps we could say farmers in the early days of embracing, because I know that there are various regulations and complexities sometimes, but if done right, could make for a really empowered experience that HCPs not only like, but they actively want to re-engage with time and time again. So, to that effect, what if HCPs could engage with you on demand via a single hub where they could connect directly with their customer facing colleagues? They had the opportunity, without being constrained by mutual availability, to collaborate in shared workspaces and maintain more of a two-way dialogue and exchange in a more flexible manner. I think that's going to be a really interesting space to see develop further in the new customer engagement models of the future. So moving on in our whistle-stop tour to number 4 of 5 of the dimensions we'll focus on today, being connective in practice. Now, we've always known, I think, through our experiences, through conversations with healthcare professionals, through research and feedback, that they are intrinsically driven to connect and collaborate with like-minded peers. And again, referring back to our HCP survey, a couple of interesting data points that captivated me when we first got the data back. Social media was a very highly rated channel option in terms of HCP preferences for how they wanted to be engaged after the pandemic on an ongoing basis. And also a good degree of appetite and indeed interest, I think, in the industry for the possibilities around remote engagement, online peer networks, many trying to grapple with the possibilities that virtual congress and the facilitating role of the pharma industry could play. I think this is a very interesting space at the moment. And actually, this desire to forge future connections isn't only limited to physicians. I remember doing a piece of research a couple of months ago looking at cancer nurse specialists in the UK and acknowledging that, again, even before the pandemic, they were very constrained in terms of their capacity. However, they had these hours of continuing professional development that they really wanted to be able to seize and to be able to use. And they also felt some degrees of isolation. So I think there is a really interesting conversation to be had and an exploration to be pursued here about the future role of the pharma industry in brokering and facilitating these sorts of connections. And I think with the appetite for these social exchanges and these networking exchanges more great than ever, there's also that uncomfortable truth that working in this very heavily regulated industry, there are going to be compliance considerations that have to be navigated. But doing so well could open up some really interesting possibilities. The idea of algorithmically matching HCPs with like-minded peers so they could share interests in a more fluid way, being given sort of a digital experience, but in a very human manner. Brokering connections between nurse specialists and pharmacists and other important influencer groups in our healthcare professional ecosystem, giving them access to novel learning opportunities via the rep could forge a stronger connection with their community of peers. And actually, one interesting observation before I move on to number 5 that we're increasingly seeing is the popularity of one to multiple exchanges, where you have one rep engaging with perhaps two or more HCPs in one remote virtual real-time session. I think that is, a very interesting model, and one I'm looking forward to seeing more of in the future as this new way of engaging really starts to take form and we make the most of different opportunities. So moving on to 5 out of 5 of our dimensions of experience. And I think this one is particularly interesting. I'm probably a bit biased because my heritage is talent and organization and people and culture. But I think it came up in one of the sessions earlier. We cannot underestimate the importance of people and culture transformation in developing great experience. And I'm really pleased to say that a number of the organizations that I work with are actively looking at this at the moment, and really trying to push that focus. And there's somewhat of an irony in it, I think, that, what industry is more purposeful than the pharma industry? Improving patient lives is its lifeblood. But do we really do as good a job as we could propagating that sense of purpose? Possibly not. And it's interesting, actually, some of our broader consumer data that isn't limited to the life sciences industry but goes broader really points to the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has reset almost what being in a society and a community means. It's tested our humanity and values. And in doing so, it's really elevated that idea of purpose. And it's offered all organizations, regardless of industry, a really timely moment to think about how do they reactivate this new shared purpose in an authentic way. So there is a really interesting opportunity here to think about how do you connect customer-facing colleagues, maybe not even just customer-facing colleagues, but anyone that plays a role in enabling that customer experience to their own unique patient-centric purpose, a purpose that helps them appreciate their authentic motivations for doing what they do, a purpose that helps them forge a more emotional, a more empathetic connection with the HCPs that HCPs will remember and be moved by and feel that sense of purpose come through. Now, doing so won't only manifest more human connections with HCPs, it can drive employee engagement, creativity, and better performance as well. So there is a really interesting space and opportunity to think about how do you elevate purpose? How do you do that as part of a reinvigoration of your people and acquaint them better with those needs that they're serving? Loads more to talk about there, but I appreciate I'm fairly short on time. So with that, I'm going to move now to think a little bit about what this really tangibly means for us and where the opportunities are to seize. And I said at the beginning that these 5 dimensions of quality aren't exhaustive. They won't be of equal importance to every HCP, but they are crucial underpinnings to meaningful experiences. And they do bring opportunities to be bold, to be distinctive, to strike out in this new experience landscape where everything has changed. Now, we know that each of these should be thoughtfully considered and planned for as opportunities to differentiate. And in terms of what that means in practice, I think there are 3 things worth noting and considering. The first point is that no one team owns quality. Quality is the product of the way that your functions, your customer facing functions, and your enabling functions work together. And I think the most successful and forward thinking organizations are those who are proactively acknowledging this. They're bringing together coalitions of leaders across their functions, and they're looking at the fundamental principles that underpin their engagement model. What levers of accountability will fuel that model? How much autonomy will you give reps over activating digital campaigns? Or what access to novel data will you give them? What are some of those rules of the road almost that will underpin, enable, and offer the foundation to a great experience? Secondly, there is a very interesting question here that I think everyone's trying to grapple with, and I'd be interested to hear from those who have ideas on this, on how do you reward quality as well as frequency and volume. We know from the past that often incentive compensation models are modeled around, numbers of visits, sales uplift, and thinking beyond that, while still acknowledging the importance of it, does give us an interesting opportunity. And also other methods of recognition that factor quality into the equation. And of course, the implication there is that you have a robust and consistent way of measuring quality, which is probably an entirely different summit topic, but nonetheless one to think about. And then finally, and it's as ever, I think, one of the challenges that we have in the industry, given how regulated it is, feeling bold to break out of the comfort zone, innovating new opportunities to compliantly bring new models of engagement that healthcare professionals crave, thinking about the role that you can play, albeit compliantly, but more boldly than before, and perhaps setting up innovation hubs or opportunities for people to think really innovatively and differently and forward thinking about different engagement concepts, and having the opportunity to test those in real life. So I appreciate I've gone through this at a fair pace. I can't see the conversation window because I'm presenting, but we do have a booth in the summit. I'll be around for the next couple of days. Please do come along if you'd like to discuss any of these themes further. I also believe, if I maybe just stop sharing my screen now, that we do have a poll ready. It might be the first poll. I'm not sure if we've had any other polls, but if we can see it potentially on the screen. Oh, we might not be able to yet. So it may come up a little bit later, but we do have a couple of polls. I would be really interested maybe in the chat if people were able to share which of these facets of quality do they believe are most important? What are they thinking about most? What are their customers thinking about most? Any of these dimensions particularly resonate with you? Would love to hear that perhaps in the chat. And I would like to take the opportunity, with just a couple of minutes left, to thank you very much for the time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to connect with everyone in this forum. And as I said, I'll be around for the next couple of days and hope to bump into many of you virtually as we explore the topics of customer experience and commercial excellence further. I'm very much looking forward to the topics ahead. Many thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.